All right, guys, we're back again. Today, we're going to finish up pretty much with the whole system. It's not going to be the last video because the last video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to post up of the whole plumbing and all the wiring and everything all finish up pretty much. So this one's going to be the last video of me working. The next video is going to be of me just showing the whole system and how it's all piped up and the way we pipe it up and wire it. So anyhow, as you can see here, I'm working still on the piping. Today we have to finish up the cold side. We had to run it in PEX because we had to cut out all the old plumbing for the cold side, and it was all rotted out and it was just hanging all over the place. So we decided to go back to the main, run PEX, and run a new line to the unit. That way everything's nice and clean and fresh, and the homeowner's gonna have no issues. So since we ran 3/4 PEX, we had to transition from PEX to copper because in the last video we had started piping up obviously all the cold side and all the water feed to the heating system in copper, which looks a lot better. So we always transition after all that to PEX if we need to do. You can see me here, I'm running 1/2 inch PEX to the water feed going to the heating side. I try to avoid fittings as much as possible from the PEX. Even though I use PEX A, it doesn't reduce the flow as bad, but I try to reduce the amount of fittings I use just to keep it flowing a lot better. So we do sweeps where we can. Once I finish up with the cold side, the last thing I have to do is all the relief valves. So there is a couple of relief valves here. There's a relief valve for the domestic side. There's a relief valve for the heated side. And then also there's one for the backflow, which gets piped up the same way. We pipe everything up, in this case, to the French drain, just in case it goes off, it doesn't flood the basement out, and the homeowners could tell if it's leaking because the splashing, and they do have an alarm also, water alarm. So anyhow, once we are done with the plumbing, feeds, returns, hot and cold, I move on to the electrical. As you can see here, I had to pull out the Takeo switch and relay box because the Navien only allows you to pipe up 3 zones. If you have more than 3 zones, you have to use a separate control box. I like to use in the Takeo. Let me know in the comments below, guys. What do you guys use? Do you guys use Takeo, another manufacturer? Do you guys wire it up differently, like the old school way with Honeywell switch and relays and things like that? I find the Takeo zone boxes are real nice. They're clean. They're easy to wire. And if you have any issues, they're real easy to diagnose the problem if you wire it up neatly. So as you can see here, I'm running the power behind the plywood wall we built. That way we could try to hide as many wires as possible and the finished product looks nice and clean. Let me know also in the comments below, guys. Do you guys wire up your own heating systems? Is it regular boilers, steam boilers, or high efficiency like this one? Do you guys count on an electrician to wire them up? Do you guys do them yourselves? I like doing them myself. What I find weird is in my area, there's a lot of electricians that don't wire these kind of systems. They said it's too much work, it's too technical, and they just don't do them. I have one electrician that does them for me in case I need them, but I like doing it all myself. I like the kind of work. So I love doing electrical also. So anyhow, I do my own electrical just for units. I don't do electrical to the house, obviously. Just I wire it up for high efficiency units or boiler, regular hot water or steam boilers. So anyhow, as you can see here, I'm wiring up all the controls from the control to the circulators. These are Grumfist circulators. They're real easy to wire, almost like Takeos, but this has a little plug, believe it or not. It's nice. It's pretty cool. Takeos don't have this. So once you wire it up into the box, you pull out the plug, wire the plug. It's almost like a quick disconnect, and then it wires right into the pump, and it's real nice. Also, I do like wiring everything individually. I like strapping everything against the wall individually. That way, in case I need to diagnose something in the long run, I could pinpoint where the wire is going. I could either change the wire, make it longer, make it shorter, and it's a lot easier, obviously, to diagnose. I see a lot of guys bunching it up with zip ties all together. I just find it looks messy, and it's a lot easier to diagnose if you have everything individually strapped. That way you could diagnose it easier. Anyhow, so once I'm finished up with the circulators, it is tedious work doing it individually, one by one, and there's a lot of zones also, 5 zones. Once I finish up with the circulators, I start wiring up the box. Again, that's a lot more tedious. You have to make sure you wire it up to the zone label that you want. In my case, I wire it up from left to right, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth zone. That way, when I'm going to go label it, I know the first circular to the left is zone 1, and whatever I have it marked as, I can mark the tackle box with a label maker. So if you saw in the beginning of the video, this was a shit show pretty much. Nothing was labeled. The zones were all out of place, so I had to decode everything. Not as bad now because I have more or less all wired up and labeled, so I knew which way to go. As you can see here, all the zone valves are, all the thermostats are wired, and all the pumps are wired also. Once I finish that up, I start moving up to the condensation. I do everything in PVC always because condensation could be acidic, and if you use any brass fittings or any metal fittings, it could eat them out eventually. I've seen some guys do it in PEX, believe it or not, and they screw in a brass female onto these units, and eventually the brass unit just corrodes off and falls off, pretty much disintegrates. It's unbelievable. So anyhow, I do everything in PVC with a neutralizer, and I drain it into the French drain. Now I'm going to start turning on everything on. I'm going to walk you through the way I do it, the way I pipe it up, and the way I bleed the system. First thing is first, shut off the valves going from the heating side into the unit. Make sure there's no water going into the unit. That way you don't have dirty water going in there. Turn on the manual feed the way I pipe it up. And then once I do that, every feed on the pumps is going to be closed and all the returns are going to be closed. You want to pressurize everything on the bottom of the unit. Make sure you have no leaks before start bleeding them. So as you can see here, I start turning the water on, and boom, what do you know it? I have a leak. It's an easy leak. It's a manifold union. I forgot to tighten up. That's why I always like doing step by step. That way, you could, if you do have a leak, either a solder joint or a union you forgot to tighten up, or a valve, a packing nut, whatever it is. If you do it section by section, you could pinpoint it, and you're not gonna have leaks all over the place if you do. So I always like doing it this way. Do step by step. Once I pressurize from the circulators down, all the piping I did, leave it there for a while, make sure nothing's leaking. Then I can move on to bleeding the system. Once you can see I turn on the valve. Once I have everything pressurized up to the circulators, they're all off as you can see, and all the returns all off. Remember guys, I got 6 returns and 5 feeds, so we're gonna have to bleed everything individually. It's good practice to do everything individually. That's why I put valves on everything. I just have one bleeder for everything. That way I don't have to switch the hose back and forward. So the way I do it is, I go on to the first circulator to the left, which is zone 1. Turn that valve on, and then I turn on the valve on the return side to the corresponding zone. I have everything labeled temporary with a Sharpie. I go back at the end when everything's nice and clean with a label maker and label everything out. So as you can see here, everything's off except one zone. All right. Once that's done, you start bleeding the system. The good thing about the way I pipe it up with that manual feed, with that PRV I install, I could do it manually. I could activate the pressure I want manually. If you do it the other way without this setup, you're going to be counting on the system to pressurize the water going into the system. That that automatic feed from the system doesn't work as good to bleed the whole system out. So you're gonna have issues with air locking. You're gonna have error codes, and just avoid the headaches and pipe it up the correct way. Use a couple more fittings, a couple more time, and go from there. So as you can see here, the water coming out, it's nice and clear, but it's gonna start getting dirty. That's because all the piping in this house is black. There's a lot of old water in the system still, and there's a lot of residue probably on the walls of the piping. Another thing that a lot of guys don't do is do a cleaning solution through the whole system. We put Sentinel X800 into the system and the heating side, and we run it for about 2 hours. When the heating season starts, we run it for about 2 hours. That way everything could be nice and clean. We drain the system, and then we add X100 inhibitor to protect the water from breaking down. That's gonna protect the unit also from corrosion or anything like that on the heating side. So once I bleed it out, make sure there's clear water on all the zones. Do step by step, one zone at a time. As you can see here, I'm messing with the reducing valve for pressure. I'm going to show you again how the water looks on the next zone. It's going to start coming out brownish, and there's going to be a lot of air pockets. Make sure it's flowing out smooth. Do not move on to the next zone if it's not clear and flowing smoothly. That means there's air pockets and you have to flush everything out. So it's going to take about a minute or two, sometimes 5, depends how big that zone is. You can see that brown water just coming out, and you'll see it eventually turning clear. I let it run clear for a little while, and then I switch over to the next zone. Do everything individually, guys. That way you can know every zone has clear water and it's clean. At least the cleanest you could get in there. Obviously, it's going to get dirtier when it gets hot, but with the cleaning solution that we put in there, it cleans all the walls of the piping. That way the system flows and works efficiently. All right, so look at that. It's still brown. You can barely tell there's water coming out, and now it start clearing up. See that? Nice and clear. That's what you want to see before moving on to the next zone. Once it's all clear and you do all the zones, you can shut it down and then turn on the system itself. That's the last step to the whole unit. Take the hose off. What I do is I clean the magnetic filter before turning anything out. You're going to start seeing all the metal buildup that was in the old piping before bleeding out the system itself. You don't forget to bleed out the system. All right, guys? See you in the last episode. If you need some plumbing work done, residential or commercial in North Jersey, let us know. See you in the next one. See ya.